Over to you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to a conversation with Andy Fell. Whatever cup you may have in front of you, whether it's your first cup of coffee of the day, whether it's your evening, afternoon cup of tea, or whether, like me, it's your evening cup of Ovaltine, I hope you enjoy it over the next 50 minutes or so. The format is very relaxed. It's myself chatting with Andy in general conversation form. What I would ask is if you have any questions, and I'm sure everybody's got plenty, we will look to have 10 minutes or so at the end. And equally, after you may have had some reflection post the call, post the conversation today, I'll give you an email address that you can send the questions to me. And then I will in turn work with Andy on them and ensure that you get a response. Okay, so I hope that's all okay. Let's kick off. So Andy, great to be spending more quality time with you. Thank you for setting this up for us. Andy, let's just start off. Let's just tell people a little bit about Andy Fell, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And well, I was born in Birmingham in the UK, and I grew up near Coventry. And you know, my parents were, I suppose, working class by wage, but very middle class in terms of ideals and aspirations. So, in one sense, a very, very kind of happy upbringing. I went through school, went through university. For a while, I dabbled with the thought of becoming a professional cricketer, which was certainly my dad's aspiration for myself. He'd been offered a professional contract, but he'd never taken that contract. And I think he was, in a sense, he was trying to live his life through me, which at times led to quite an interesting and challenging relationship with my father, because I wanted to follow a very, very different path. But it almost set me up to realize that you can't push anyone in a direction that they don't want to go. You have to create the right environment. You have to create the right culture. You have to create the right tone where people want to move in that direction for themselves. And I think that stood with me through, and still does to this day, through my whole life. And then on the back of university, you know, I had some serious student debts to pay off, and I decided I would join a bank for 2 years, pay off my debts, and work out what I wanted to do in my life. That was the Royal Bank of Scotland. 20 years later, I was still there. Most of my career at RBS was absolutely fabulous. I spent most of my life leading big distribution businesses, branches, areas, regions, super regions. Had the privilege to run the east and north of Scotland as a 33-year-old boy, first English guy to run a big part of Scotland for the RBS. Prior to myself, most guys they're all men, they're all Scottish, they're all been in their 50s. And I brought something that I believe was quite different to that. And it was a really transformational time in my life and my career. And, you know, my career then had a few, let's just say, ups and downs, a few difficult periods, but I spent time running learning and development. I spent time running internal communications. And then finally, I got an amazing job working for an amazing CEO, a guy called Craig Donaldson, who I'll always be eternally grateful for through the rest of my life for a number of reasons. Craig hired me to be the director of first party mortgages for RBS, NatWest, and the private banks, and that was another absolutely brilliant time in my career. And then the GFC came along, and I had the difficult task of making myself and all of my leaders, Alan Chapman's on the call here, all of my leaders redundant. Certainly, we're all displaced, and we all had to go and find our next role. And I took the opportunity to exit RBS at that point. Paul, I was going to set up my own business, but then I got a call from a headhunter recruiting for a bank here in Australia. 3 months later, I was offered a job to run the state of Queensland. Queensland, for those that don't know, is bigger than France, Germany, and the UK put together in size, but there's about 4.5 million people. So one of the things we don't have a problem with here is space. And I moved out to Australia. We're going to be here for 2 years. Then we're going to go to Singapore for 2 years. Then we're going to go back to the UK. That was our plan. But an old mentor of mine once said to me, if you can see the plan in front of you, it said, if you can see the path in front of you, it's probably someone else's. And actually, that's the way that it's worked out. 11 years later, here we are. We're still in Australia. We lived on the Gold Coast where we live now for 2 years. Then we moved to Sydney for 6.5. between Westpac and St. George. Had the privilege of running the St. George Bank in Australia for 3.5 years. An organization at the time, the personal values and the corporate values were very, very lined up. And then, Paul, I made a mistake. I moved back to Westpac, and now when I coach people, I say, look, whatever you do, look for the leader and look for the culture. Don't chase the pounds or the dollars. Don't chase the fancy job title. And that's exactly what I did. I moved back to a role and ended up working for someone, let's just say, it was never going to work out. But it was a brilliant thing because it made me look deep within myself. I was turning 50, to look deep within myself and question everything about what I was doing. So I turned 50, had an amazing experience in Bali, and then 6 months later, I'd left corporate. So I went from being a general manager of a major bank, Australia's first company, to starting a business. So pretty safe, pretty secure, pretty well paid, to absolutely nothing at 50. I've got 4 kids, all working their way through education. But I just took the plunge and I backed myself to build and create an amazing business. I don't, do I earn what I earned when I was a general manager of a bank? No. Am I 1,000 times happier? Absolutely, yes. Do I love what I do? Do what I love? Do I live my purpose on a daily basis? Absolutely. And I fundamentally believe that, the work I do, it's the wind beneath others' wings, and it helps people soar to new heights. So I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my whole life. Moved back to the Gold Coast, which is, as Helen knows, just a phenomenal part of the world to live. And I believe, if you constantly work on your confidence, your belief systems, your self-esteem, then you believe anything is possible. Then you have the courage to really live true to your purpose and your passion. So that's where I am today. And then obviously just over 12 months ago, COVID came along. I built a life as a conference speaker, a face-to-face coach. I did leadership, talent development. I ran offsites for major clients. And on the 13th of March last year, I lost about 60% of my business. A week later, I'd lost 100%. All future bookings had gone. No conferences, no events, no offsites. And I had to reinvent myself again. And so April and May last year were, let's just say, pretty awful. Didn't see a lot of income coming through the door. But October last year was my best month in business. November was my second best. And I literally just had some serious Mozart time and just pivoted the business completely, become much more international, much more virtual. And Australia is really operating really well again domestically. So the face-to-face work that I was doing domestically is back. And now I've got this international portfolio of leadership and coaching work. So yeah, that's who I am, a little bit about my story, some big changes, but there's opportunity in absolutely everything. As long as your mindset's right, as long as your attitude's right and your belief system's right, there is always a way, there is always an opportunity, is just the way I think about the world.
You've mentioned a couple of times you've mentioned 4 children, you've mentioned a wife. Just tell us a little bit about Andy Fell, the family man, before we get into the business side.
Yeah, so I've as I say, I've got 4 kids. Emma, she's 23 years old. I'm not her biological father, but I'm her dad in every sense. All of my 4 kids have changed my life in some way, by the way. Emma, she's very creative, very innovative. She's a highly successful entrepreneur at 23. She's building a huge network marketing business. She's now building a brand called In Charge, based around an app which will have amazing organizational tools, amazing goal setting tools. It'll have a separate app around a meditation app. So Emma's incredibly successful in her own right as an entrepreneur. Tom, my son, is 20. Tom's based in England. He's from my first marriage with his mother. Tom, just an absolutely wonderful human being. And when we moved to Australia, the most difficult decision I've ever had to make in life was myself, my amazing wife, Leona, our 3 girls. We moved here. It's an amazing country. It's an amazing culture. It's an amazing lifestyle. We moved here for the good of 3 girls, but we obviously had to leave Tom at home with his mother. And I look at a picture of Tom every single day, and it absolutely drives me. If you can connect to something that gets you at a deeply emotional level, you'll get through any barrier, you'll get through any hurdle. And I say to myself every single day, Paul, I didn't come here to be average. When I was talking to Bill McFarlane, he said, reframe that, say you came here to be exceptional. So I look at a picture of Tom every single day and I say that to myself. I will be exceptional today because I owe it to him, I owe it to his sisters, I owe it to myself, I owe it to Leona. Tom and I, obviously, this is the longest period we've never seen anyone. We've never seen each other on a face-to-face basis. So he helps me with Future You, which means we talk more than we've ever talked before. And again, he's really building his knowledge and understanding of how to be a successful business person. And I've got two amazing young girls, Lucy, who's 17, and Lily, who's 12, both of whom do little bits to help me in business. Lily's a budding entrepreneur at 12. And we just create an environment. Leona's an amazing mother, an amazing business leader, an amazing entrepreneur in her own right. And we just create this environment around the kids that they just know and believe that anything is possible. And we want them to try stuff. I lived, as I say, with a difficult relationship with my own father, who was very kind of controlling and had a very traditional way of looking at business and life. I'm very, very different to that as a father. I set, a bit like I did in business, for those that were ever part of my world, very, very broad empowerment, and the kids, they know these guardrails, but they're very free to operate within that. I expect Lucy will go back to the UK, and I really would encourage her to do that should she get the opportunity. And that's the mindset we want. Go and explore, go and try things, make mistakes. We don't make mistakes within a certain world and environment, but make mistakes, try things, follow your own path. Don't feel you need to follow the life that I felt, that I followed for so many years. So that's our life, that's our world. Leona, she's my greatest coach. She's a successful businesswoman, and often it's the morning. We do morning movement every day. We go and walk the dog, and it's often through those conversations that Leona will say something that will be a spark that becomes a new way that I think, or a new business product, or helps me pivot my business in a different way. So that's really the Fell family environment, and it's fundamental to enabling me to just go and do the work that I do.
Thank you for that insight. I think it's very important. We've all got insights into our family life. It's all about the oil, if you like, that drives the wheels. So thank you for sharing that. Andy, you and I met back in the day at RBS. That was also the day you introduced me to the fantastic Jim Brandon. I remember in your time in the training and the coaching side. You also reset the bar at RBS for feedback. Do you remember what you used to do on the giving of immediate, quick feedback?
No, but I'd love you to share what I used to do on the giving of immediate feedback.
Yeah, well, we all did. We certainly all did across the whole of the organisation. Regarding, it could have been something as simple as a Post-it note. It could have been something as simple as a postcard. It could have been something as a very simple pick up the phone, well done on what you did. And I physically saw people grow, well, physically and mentally, just on the back of the feedback that you gave and the doors that you introduced to people and opened to people. And as I said, I really think you reset the bar there, Andy.
I mean, one of the things that I fundamentally believe, one of my grandfathers was my first great teacher, and my grandfather came from very, very humble beginnings. I know Downton Abbey was watched by many in the UK, and he started life as a servant. He lived in the stables. He left school at 12. He lived in the stables with the horses, and then he got promoted to be a footman in the big house. At the end of his life, my business is Gift 631. 631 is a property in which I grew up. And my grandfather, when my grandmother passed, used to come and spend 3 months of every year there. And they were brilliant times for me. I was about 17. I was probably too young to really understand everything, but I've always been a journaler. I've always written everything down. And I wrote down all of my grandfather's teachings. But he used to say to me, live life with a servant's heart, live life with gratitude, always put good out into the universe, never worry about getting it back, just do people a good turn. And that became a philosophy of give to get. Now, as I know that there's a few people here who listen to the High Performance podcast. If you listen to the episode with James Timpson, that's exactly how Timpsons have built such an enormous business over the years. It's that philosophy of give to get. What more can I do to help? So a big part of that for me, Paul, was giving praise and recognition, and working on a personal best kind of mindset, that if you get everyone in your team or business to do a little bit more than they've ever done before, then the business is naturally going to move forward. And you've got to reinforce that. You've got to reinforce the behaviors that you want and expect and appreciate. So finding these moments to continually praise and recognize, as well as putting good out into the universe, was just the right thing to do. And then I ended up working for a guy called Mike Geekott very early in my career. And Geeky used to say, and Geeky really, really wants to do a future you interview, which would be fantastic. A big impact in the early part of my life and career. And Geeky used to say, every manager can find 15 minutes a day to say thank you. And so being a young kid, I just put in my diary 15 minutes of praise, recognition, and celebration. And I did that through my whole career. Even when I was GM of the St. George Bank, I had 15 minutes in my diary straight after my Mozart time to just say thank you. And there's no basis of fact for this, Paul, but I fundamentally believe I wrote more handwritten cards than the other 79 general managers of the Westpac group put together. Now, no basis of fact for that, but people used to say to me all the time, how do you find the time to do that stuff? And I go, well, it's easy. I just have it in my diary, 15 minutes of praise, recognition, and thank you. And I would strongly encourage everyone to, whether you run a big business, a small business, whether you're employed, unemployed, whatever it is, just appreciate others, put good out into the universe. When my business was hitting the shit, excuse my language, through COVID, you would be amazed at the number of people who came back to just help. You know, people without anything in it for themselves, but because I believe in the way that I'd been over the years, people wanted to help me in return. And that's what it's about. You give to get. And I think that's the philosophy that really you're talking about there, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. When I talk to clients and candidates, I always say that a person leaves a business twice, once in their head, once physically. So you'd spent a huge number of years at RBS. How did you know, and when did you know that the time was going to be right to leave?
Because I'd screwed it up the first time round. I was a glory boy of RBS in my early days. You know, I was the youngest chief manager, as they were called. I was the youngest regional managing director, you know, and we just smashed it up, right? We were just a phenomenal performing business. And I thought in business that was enough. I thought, you know, if you treat people in the right way and you perform to an exceptional level, that's enough. Now you get to a certain level and everything that got you there won't get you any further. And suddenly you're in the swamp with all of the alligators. And, you know, it becomes all about sponsorship. It becomes all about, you know, politics. It becomes all about allegiances. And I am to this day incredibly terrible at that game. And I just tripped myself over. And the organization tripped me over, to be honest. Malcolm McDowell once said to me, who was a brilliant leader that I worked for, he said, look, Andy, what you got to realize is the most talented people, this is in big corporates, hardly ever get to the very top of their organization, because they get to a certain level and they suddenly become a threat. And then all the walls kind of pack together and bring them down. And unfortunately, you know, I fell victim of that, as did Malcolm, by the way. And I didn't leave, Paul. You know, I was crushed for a while by the organization, and I slowly rebuilt myself over a period of time. That's when, you know, I started to really work with people like Jim Brandon and another guy, Jonathan Stevens, Bill McFarlane. These guys, you know, really helped me build myself back together. And I started to develop a series of winning habits, winning frameworks, winning routines, because I'm a confidence player like everyone else. And my confidence was down, and my self-confidence, you know, when my self-confidence is down, I retreat into my comfort zone. So I said, this will never happen again. And working with amazing people like Gary, like Lisa Brindle, through my days in learning and development, I started to build out this framework of winning habits, winning routines. And then when it came that it was time to leave RBS, my confidence, my belief system, my self-esteem was so good, I just backed myself, and I just knew with the owner's support that it was the time to go. Then equally, to make the move to Australia, we just backed ourselves, and we just asked ourselves the two questions: what's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? You know, and we couldn't really see the downside. We'd moved to Australia for 2 years. It didn't work out. The kids had amazing different cultural experience, and then we'll go and try something else, and then we'll go and try something else. So, I think it's because of the falls on the way that has helped me with everything since. But the other thing I would say, and it's a privilege that Jim's on this call, I would recommend to everybody that, we can't do this alone, right? You need to build this winning circle around you, which is one of the things, obviously, we look to do through Future You, where we'll all help each other. We're all going to have difficult moments. We're all going to have great opportunities. And by the way, when you're facing a number of great opportunities, it's equally important to have a winning circle around you, just to make sure you don't chase, too many rabbits, and you're able to maintain, discipline and focus. But it's because I was down on the floor and I didn't know how to deal with it, because until that point, my life was going like this, and suddenly it's gone like this, and I just couldn't handle it, and I didn't back myself to leave at that particular point. People also say, Paul, how do you leave, the security of a general management job at 50? And it's the same thing, right? The only difference was I took the Richard Branson test. And Branson talks about, you're 90 years old, you're sitting in your rocking chair, you're looking back on your life. He says, what do you want to say to yourself? Do you want to say to yourself, well, I could have done this, I should have done the other, I had the ability to do that, I was going to do this? Or do you want to say to yourself, well, I didn't get everything right, but I lived life to the best of my ability. I gave it my best shot. And that, when I took that Richard Branson test on my 50th birthday, that's when I knew I had to leave corporate and go and set up my own business. Same thing, got an amazing winning circle around me. Leona was just phenomenal in backing me to go and do that. And I just took the plunge. And one of the things I've learned more recently is, in life, we've got to work out, where do we need to be 66% awesome? And where do we need to be 100% perfect? There's certain things you've got to be 100% perfect, but there's a lot you've got to be 66% awesome. And too many people wait until they believe they've got everything 100% before they move. I'm very different. I decide what I'm going to do, I commit to it, and then I go. And once I go, I am all in. So, I just said, right, I haven't worked it out completely, but I'm just going to go. And once I leap off the side of the pool, I'm going to hit the water, and I'm going to work out how to swim. And that's basically what I did when I left RBS to move to Australia, when I left corporate, to set up Gift 631. Decide, commit, and go. But go with absolutely everything that you've got.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Anybody who's on LinkedIn, when you see your updates on a daily basis, you'll see somebody with a microphone in their hand, and their job title will be coach, mentor, motivational speaker. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of them, all wanting your time, all wanting to spend time and change your life individually. Andy, what elevates what you do with Gift 631 above these other people?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. You have got to be very clear. I mean, the world is full of professional coaches. The world is full of speakers. And as I say, I journal every single day, and I was just journaling a few words about what I wanted my business to be about when I moved on from corporate. And essentially, it's called space. What I do is simple. What I do is practical. What I do is actionable. What I do is clear. And what I do is experience-based. So that's really, I say everything I do has to be space related. What I believe my key differential is the people I work with. So I'd never say I'm a life coach or stuff like that. I'm a business coach, right? Although we do talk about a lot of personal things. So when I'm dealing with entrepreneurs, I'm dealing with business owners, I'm dealing with senior managers, what they're buying is my experience. I've run a $2 billion business. I've run a 2,000 people business. They want someone who's been in the arena of business. That's what people hire me for. And I'm never going to say I'm and I never say I'm a motivational speaker, because motivation is intrinsic, it comes from within, but also it's temporary, and what I've realized what I want to do is making a lasting, sustainable difference. So if you go to Gift, my business is Gift 631. The G is growth. personal, team, and business. The I is inspiration, not Tony Robbins type inspiration, but inspiring people to go from where they are, you, to future you, to cross that river of self-doubt. It's about fulfillment, helping my clients lead some of them are very, very financially successful, but when we start working together, they're miserable. They're running a business, they're in early, they're home late, they never see their partner, they never see their kids, the dog doesn't even want to go for a walk with them anymore. So it's helping them find that warmth, that success that comes through fulfillment and happiness. And then the T is transformation, personal, team, and business. So very, very clear what I do, very clear about the difference that I make, but it's based on business experience and leadership experience. That's what I believe, people are buying.
Yeah, agreed. And Andy, what's the best business advice you've ever received?
So I mentioned Mike Geacock and his 15 minutes of thank you, which has really helped me enormously through the years. I'll give you two others if you don't mind. The first one was Tony Schofield. I'm a young kid. I'm the executive assistant to the managing director. And Tony, by the way, this is going back to 1991. Tony, he totally understood diversity and inclusion. He wanted 2 executive assistants, 1 male, 1 female, 1 English, 1 Scottish. I mean, how cool is that going back to 1991? He really understood how to get into the psyche of the body of the Kirk, the Royal Bank of Scotland. And Tony, once I was sitting in his office and he said to me, he said, Andy, he said, the only people who don't make mistakes are the people who don't do anything. And he encouraged me to live my life with a bias to action, which, as you can see playing out, is where I've always been. And essentially avoid procrastination and overthinking. And the only people who don't make mistakes are the people who don't do anything. And then the second one, probably the best all-time piece of advice I've ever received, was from Malcolm McDowell. And Malcolm said to me, he said, Andy, he said, do the job you're doing today as if you are doing it forever. He said, and then he said, you won't paper over the cracks. You won't put Band-Aids on things. You'll get to the root cause of the problem. He said, you'll hire an A-grade team that fit with you, from an attitude, mindset, cultural perspective, because you're going to be working with these people forever. He said, hire the best people that you can afford in every single position, but make sure they fit from an attitude, belief system, culture perspective, because imagine you're going to be working with them forever. He said, then you think both short-term and long-term, because again, you're going to be doing this job as if you're going to be doing it forever. And the final thing, another thing he taught me actually was also brilliant advice, which I've got here on the desk because I was doing a session for Amanda Reed, those that know Amanda, last night, and her business in the UK. So it was a pretty late one last night and a pretty early one this morning, but that's cool. And he once drew this on a piece of paper, and I was sharing it with Amanda's group last night. And he said, as you get more, as you go through your career and life, it's important you grow, not swell. He said, the day you swell and you believe your own bullshit, the day your ego takes over, you're in big trouble. So he says, grow and not swell. Ego is the enemy of achievement. So, I was really lucky that I worked for these phenomenal business leaders. And when I wasn't working for a phenomenal business leader, I had people like Jim, like Bill, like Richard West, like Bill, like Jonathan Stevens. I had this cadre of people that were just phenomenal mentors and business buddies and friends and collaborators. So, then I just had this, when my career was going the other way, once I moved on from Malcolm, that this was the group of people who helped me rebuild and reshape and believe in myself again. Jim, over 20 odd years, has just been my Boondini Brown. He's the guy, he's the wind beneath my wings, that when I'm doubting myself, have a conversation with Jim or Jonathan or Leona, and I just know that anything is possible.
Fantastic. If you had your time over again, what, if anything, would you do differently?
Number one, don't stay where you're not valued. I didn't have the confidence to leave RBS when I should have done. Now, the upside of that is, like I said earlier, I would never put myself back in that position. So that's where my routines, my habits, my frameworks, a lot of it came from. So that'd be the first. Don't stay where you're not valued is something. And I learned that lesson because then I left Westpac when I was just working for the wrong person, which has led to, unbelievable happiness in Give 631. The second one, I would have given myself options earlier in my life and career. And I look at my daughter Emma now. She's not happy just to have built an amazing network marketing business at 23. She's now, investing in her app, which is going to become a whole brand. She's giving herself options, and that's where Leona and I have got to in life. We've got massive aspirations for when Lily's 18. She's 12 now, so we're building this portfolio of options. What Winners Do is my events brand. I've been able to do a virtual blast off program, but not been able to do any events, obviously, for the last 15 months. So, if that was my only option, then I'm in big trouble. So build options. Those of you who work for corporates, the nature of corporate is going to change enormously over the next 5 to 10 years. And people are just hoping that they'll just hang on, they'll just hang on. Now, if you're at a certain point in life, that may be fine. But certainly when you're talking to your kids or whoever else it might be, some of your team, I think it's really important that we encourage people to have side hustles or build different options on the side, because, big organizations, look at RBS, right? I grew up in the West Midlands, huge population, and there's 3 branches. There's Wolverhampton, there's one in Birmingham, and there's one in Coventry, and that's it. When I was a kid, there was lots of branches, lots of opportunities, contact centers. If you work in a contact center environment, how long have you got with artificial intelligence and robotics and everything else that's coming along? So Santi's on here, his whole world is the school of digital. And I think that to me, Paul, is I didn't do that early enough in my life and my career. So when things were not going my way, that was the only option, and I was clinging on to it when I didn't need to.
And what would you say your biggest learn from that then was?
My biggest learn through life has if I go right back to the start, my biggest learn in life was let people live their own life. I was a very talented cricket player in the day, but I stopped playing cricket at 23, and I've never held a cricket bat since, because my father pushed, and eventually I just rejected, and I just walked away. So I think that's a very big learn that I've carried all the way through my life in terms of how I try to set things up. The other thing I would say, when I look at the mistakes I made in life and business, Paul, all were around people. I'm a fundamental believer in the need to hire an A-grade team. Whenever my recruitment standards even slip slightly, I live to regret it. The only thing I did slowly in business was recruit, because it's such an important part of business. But when I recruited at haste, I live to regret it. And the other side of that's true as well. When my instinct told me someone was culturally not right for my business, the times where I gave people, I just give them another chance. I just give them another chance. Another chance just didn't pay off. So my biggest mistakes, if you like, my biggest learns were build an environment where people want to bring their true self to work. They want to do their best work. Too many leaders try and all they do is manage numbers, and they try and push. And we've got to have a very, very different view to leadership than that. I come from the exact opposite place, but it's not happy clappy. Get the right people on the bus, and absolutely get the wrong people off the bus as quickly as you possibly can.
Okay. You've mentioned the phrase a couple of times, wind beneath your wings, and you're certainly that for me. You're certainly one of the biggest inspirations in my life and what I've got. How do you develop your winning mindset?
Well, it starts first thing in the morning for me, and I have a whole host of of routines, and I start every day with my 4M routine. Difficult, this was 5:30 this morning, so I have a real short form routine, but I was up early. This is the shortest of short forms. I center myself through a 2-minute, meditation. I then do a very, very quick affirmation and visualization exercise. So I was visualizing this conversation and the outcome of this conversation, how I wanted to perform through this conversation. So I will use affirmations, visualizations. In my journal, I write every single day what I'm proud of, something I've achieved in my life, big or small. I'll write a few things that I'm happy and grateful for. I have a state changer, a 60-second state changer. If ever I'm drifting or my mindset is not where it needs to be, in 60 seconds, I'll literally write down my primary goal, my chosen affirmation, 2 or 3 things that I'm happy and grateful for, and something I'm proud of that I've achieved in my life. I have a very, very, I have an inner circle, a winning circle, if you like, of go-to people that, every time I just interact with them, it just builds my confidence, my belief system. I do push all negative influences as far out of my life that I possibly can. My office here is there's actually a basketball shirt on the wall over there that Jim Brandon, who's on the call, gave me. It says Fell One Rhino. Jim calls me the Silent Rhino. I've got a montage of photos over there from my 50th birthday, which is the day that changed my life, the day that I decided to set up Gift 61. You've got to surround yourself both with the right people, but also with the right visual images that just reinforce who you are and where you're going. My screensaver was designed by Lucy when she was 12. She's now 17. And it's 2 people on a surfboard, one with no arms and legs, and one Bethany Hamilton, who had her arm bitten off by a shark. And that's my screensaver. And when I asked Lucy why she designed that as my screensaver, she's like, Dad, if they can do that, you can do anything. And that's what I think about when I turn on my laptop. I see that image, and that's what I think about every single day. If they can do that, you can do anything. I've got my picture of Tom over there. I've got 2 quotes over there. One from Michael Phelps, the swimmer, that just says, "What matters now?" And as soon as I drift or I'm losing focus, I read that. I go, right, what matters now? Get back on it. I've just come up with the next 6 things that I'm going to smash out in terms of my business. Gary Duncan knows my 1-3-6 type model. I've got another quote over there that is from a guy called Royston Guest that just says, "Prevent procrastination, decide, commit, go." So it's a whole range. Never mind some of the more, like the full morning routine that I'll go through once we've done this call. Leona and I will get our movement in. Then I'll complete my mind cleanse, and I'll do a full meditation. Then I'll have my Mozart time. The most fundamental, important activity of my day is my Mozart time. Time for myself, by myself, with myself. No technology, no chance of interruption and disruption. Just me thinking. How do I be a better father? How do I be a better leader? How do I build a better business? How do I perform better on future you calls? How do I serve my customers better? How do I find new customers? Whatever it might be, it's just space with no technology, no emails, no meetings, where I just think about who I am, where I'm at, and how I take my life and my business forward.
How do you join that winning mindset to your success formula? And what is your success formula?
My success formula is quite simply S equals G plus M plus A times D. And again, we could spend, in fact, last night's session with Amanda's World, it was just a full-on hour going through that success formula. And then this personal shield exercise, which is about getting to a deeper sense of self. And I believe 80% of great leadership is amazing self-leadership. But my success formula, the G is goals. And when I was down in your neck of the woods, Paul, I was working with an organization called the Exeter insurance business. And I've always hated SMART goals. When you work for a bank, you're conditioned to believe in SMART goals. It's just about limited thinking, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. I love specific. I love measurable. I love time-bound. A goal without a deadline is a wish. I hate achievable. I hate realistic. That encourages you to go just a little bit outside your comfort zone. I'm about SMUT goals: specific, measurable, unachievable, unrealistic, time-bound. So go really, really big in terms of your goal setting. The only other thing I'll say on goals, given time, is Michelangelo. The danger for most of us is is not that we set the bar so high and we miss it, it's that we set the bar so low and we hit it. The M is mindset. And again, we can talk about that all day long. The A is action, but it's not any old action. It's high value action. And most people, they don't have enough differentiation between high value action and low value action. And people spend a ton of their time. People think the way out of an issue is just to work harder, and they just get stuck into low value action. For me, you've got to step back, use your Mozart time to really understand the high value action that you need to multiply that takes you in the direction of those goals. So really being very, very clear about how to effectively use time. So you double down on the high value action. And then the D is the great accelerator, and that's the ability to debrief. And someone that I knew briefly was a guy called Yehuda Shinar, who wrote a book called Winning. And Yehuda was the guy who worked with Clive Woodward when England won the Rugby World Cup. He worked with the coaches, not with the players so much. Think correctly under pressure. Teacup actually came from Yehuda Shinar, although Sir Clive Woodward claims it, and why not? He won the World Cup. But the other thing he said is winners debrief more than the average. So every significant activity that I undertake, Paul, I'll then do a very, very quick debrief. If you do that consistently over time, then your performance, the compound effect of that is absolutely significant, because you're driving yourself to continually improve all the significant activity that you do. Richard West, who's friends with Jim Brandon and myself, long career in the commercial side of Formula One motor racing, worked with all the greats. Richard used to say when he worked, in Formula One, they had a 3-step process. Plan what you're going to do it, and review it. And he says in business, he sees so much of the doing, he sees a reasonable amount of planning, but he sees next to no reviewing. And I think, and also when he worked with Schumacher, he said Schumacher would spend more time in the Ferrari garage after a race that they won as opposed to a race that they lost, because he wanted to analyze the root cause of success as well as disappointment. So I think that's really important. It's debriefing all of the significant activity that you do to find the 1-2 percenters to fuel your continuous improvement. So the things that have gone really well, why? What did you learn? How do you do more of them? The things that haven't gone so well, why? What did you learn? How do you minimize the likelihood of that impacting your performance again? And that's my success formula. That's that is very clear in terms of how I think about where I'm taking the world.
There's a massive point you make in there around Mozart time, around time for thought, time for your own mental planning, as opposed to coming into your day and thinking, I've got to be busy today and I've got to spend my time doing low value things. And I think that's massive, absolutely massive.
When COVID hit, Paul, I'd lost 100% of my business. And I thought, I cannot work myself out of this problem. So I did double the amount of exercise. I did double the amount of meditation. I did double the amount of Mozart time. And I did double the amount of self-development. I got into this thing called the High Performance Podcast. And because I was running more, the more I was running, the more I was listening to the High Performance Podcast. So I thought, I've got to step back and I've got to think my way out of this problem. And then, I've only got 2 speeds in business, in life, actually, still and fast. But if I'm going to go fast, I want to make sure I'm going to go fast in what I believe is the right direction. So I've got to have that stillness first. And that's where the Mozart time came in. So I just gave myself a breather. I just gave myself a bit of time. I thought I need to meditate because, I want to just control my state. I want to reduce the anxiety, reduce the pressure, reduce the stress, increase my focus and concentration. I need exercise, stimulate the body, stimulate the mind. It's a very creative state. I need to be fit. I need to be healthy. I wanted to invest in myself. I wanted to go back to really learning from champions. And Hans Pearson, one of the CEOs that I coach, he said, the other thing you got to start doing is interviewing some of the amazing people around the world. So that's how we started. That's how I started with interviews with Jim and Richard and Manny Martinez. And then it kind of snowballed from there once Future You came along. But all of this incredible input I was getting from all these incredible people was just fueling me to rebuild. So yeah, it's critical.
We've heard about some of the times of 2020, thought times, how you rebuilt, how you kicked on again. Tell us now, so we're in what, May next week, May 2021. Tell us about the next 3 months, 6 months for you and 2022 as well. What are your plans? Where's the business going?
Yeah, well, I suppose that's these 6 themes that I've been building up over a period of time, and it kind of goes like this. So I'll put it out there into the universe. I've given myself a week in May. I've got nothing in that week at all. No client work, nothing. That's when I finally finish my first book. And the Winning Circle and everyone who renews on their future you on an annual basis will get a signed copy of that book. It just needs to be out there. Secondly, I'm going to work up a second book, and it's going to be a much more of a collaboration. And again, Alan Chapman, Lisa know a little bit about this, where I really want the last year. I want to bring the last year to life in terms of my learnings, a bit like what Jake and Damien are doing through the High Performance Podcast, but all the speakers we've had, like Jim and everyone else, pulling some of their insights, their learnings, taking learnings from the weekly blog. We've had so many amazing guest bloggers, and put all that together into a really excited collaborative book. I'm going to record and release my second video-based virtual program. We've got Soaring to New Heights out there, which is all about you as an individual. It's actually based around the success formula. It takes people through that success formula in depth, and then finishes with my A-frame success. The second one I'm going to do is a Leadership 101 video-based virtual course. And I'm going to build out my inner circle, which is going to be quite an elite group with quite a hefty kind of price tag attached with that. And that's going to be a small group of 8 senior business leaders. So I'm really excited about that concept, with some offsites and some amazing guest speakers from around the world. I'm going to revamp my journal. I'm thinking about a virtual version of the journal. And then the 6th theme is I'm going to, I can do it now in Australia, but I've been nervous to do it, is I desperately want to get back to what winners do. My ultimate goal for 2021, if I can finish 2021 by doing a live virtual What Winners Do event in Edinburgh, that's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Desperate to get back to the UK, see my mom, see my son, see a whole host of other people. That's we booked our flights to leave Australia 7th of December, spend some time in the UK, finish it with a What Winners Do live event in Edinburgh. Bit of a gathering celebration after that. That'll end a brilliant year, by which time I would have nutted out everything else on this list as well.
All right, sorry, before I ask the last question, I just need to make a note of that. 7th of December 2021, because I've still got a note on my phone that you owe me lunch.
I do owe you lunch.
8th or 9th of December will be fine. I'll get that in the diary. Thank you.
Yeah, I do owe you lunch, mate. Yeah, may even buy you a glass of wine for being so kind to host this as well. You never know.
Bless you. Well, I'm conscious of where we're at, and we said that we would converse for 50 minutes. And Andy, thank you for everything you've shared. Really, we've touched on a heck of a lot of things. I'm really pleased that we've recorded, because it's certainly a chance to listen, play back, listen again. There's some really good stuff that you've shared, some intimate stuff as well, and that's why I pushed you a little bit on the family side as well. So thank you for all of that. Guys, we've got about 8 minutes or so. Has anybody got anything that they would like to ask? Anything of Andy, anything of future plans, or anything that you've heard today?
Yes, I do.
Mr. B, hello, sir.
How are you? It's amazing,
Always well, Mr. B. Always well.
Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
I am absolutely very excited about seeing the both of you actually together. Reconnecting, because the two of you, when I was in Royal Bank of Scotland doing a lot of work with Andy and yourself, just two people that I really just resonated with me, just had huge respect for how you went about your business, the passion, the warmth, the commitment to self-development for all those around you. You both are exceptional in your very different ways. I've given Andy a lot of what I thought of him over the years, and so he knows, but I've not had a chance really to tell you, having someone who was on the level that you were in the company, you were huge. I remember telling Andy, he'll tell you off screen, I always enjoyed when he sent me to work with you. It was not work. I really enjoyed it, got a lot out of it. You really cared about your people. That's something that's very important. You cared about your people deeply. You were passionately connected. You were very much a person who allowed input, from your troops, that allowed the team to move forward in a positive way. So I'm sure you're doing the same thing. And I'm really been wanting to, for many years, been wanting to tell you how awesome of a leader you are. And I really, truly, completely enjoyed working with you every second I was in your your business. And I want to thank you, brother, for that. So I'm glad to see you have your podcast here, and glad glad to hear everyone out there for Future You. Just keep coming to this, because this is where that warmth that Andy talks about. I know that Paul lived. And the thing about, Andy, I call him the silent rhino, because he does that. I get as much out of Andy, when he walks away as when he's talking to me. That's how he hits me deep. You as well. Okay, give that warmth and make people really understand from I always used to say, do you feel me? Okay, you're perfect at making people feel you. Okay, so keep doing that, brother, and stay with the Future You. This is going to be that warmth that all of you need out there for moving forward and developing. This is the place, so always come back.
Thanks, Jim. Fantastic
Thank
work.
you, Jim.
Thank you,
and I'll set up a call between you, me, and Paul. Let's do it. That'll be really good.
Excellent.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Any other thoughts? Anybody else got anything they'd like to share? It's been good fun on the call. Anybody else like to share anything?
Hi, Andy. I'd love to ask you, Andy. You've mentioned the High Performance Podcast a few times, and we're both big fans and big followers. Who would you say, of all the episodes you've listened to so far, has been the biggest inspiration, and why?
Wow. I found Sir Chris Hoy phenomenal. I found the principal dancer from the Royal Ballet, who was born in a slum outside Lisbon, from African heritage. I found his episode absolutely phenomenal. The most recent one, I really actually took a ton of value from James Timpson, Nins Purger. The list could just go on and on and on. Sean Dyche, actually, the Burnley manager, I took a huge amount of value from that as well. But yeah, I could just keep going. Joe Malone, I took a huge dose of Susie Ma. I don't know if anyone's listened to Susie Ma. Susie Ma was absolutely brilliant. I coach a few Chinese Australian women, and they're amazing women. And again, Jim knows Jackie Nee, for example, but they just need that level of self-belief and confidence to soar to new heights. And I shared with them Susie Ma, and it's just phenomenal. She was born in China, grew up in Australia, ended up in the UK, was on the thing with Alan Sugar, The Apprentice, and then gone on to be a very, very successful entrepreneur. So yeah, I found inspiration across a whole range of their guests. And it was really cool that obviously we interviewed Professor Damien Hughes, and then he delayed Matt McConaughey, an Oscar-winning actor, because he was having a chat in a group like this. So I always like to go back to that one as well, because I played the interview we did with Professor Damien Hughes, and there he is 5 minutes later, and he's doing that. So that was pretty cool as well, from a different perspective. I agree, Lisa. Jim's t-shirt is absolutely phenomenal too. How about you? Who's your favourite?
To be honest, the Chris Hoy one I really like, but I think the one that stood out for me was actually Eddie Hearn and Casper Schmeichel, which I think was series 3 or season 2. They've all got things, but I think for me, I make sure that every episode I listen to, I write one thing from every episode. There's more than one, but you can become overwhelmed. So what has there been, 40 episodes, something like that? So I've probably got 40 different things written down. But yeah, every season's been superb, to be honest, Andy. There's no one that stands out.
Yeah, no,
Alan, how do you challenge yourself to go back and revisit those 40? Because as you say, you've picked one brilliant thing from each one. Fantastic. How do you then, I guess, test yourself that you use them?
I pick 1 or 2 each week. I've got a checklist, a bit like Andy's routine. Paul, I've got a checklist that I make sure I do certain things every single day, every single week. And one of those things that I've added this year is revisit at least 1 or 2 of my notes from the High Performance Podcast. Any more than that, it wouldn't be effective for me. So 1 or 2. So over a period of 6 months, I'll have covered them, and I'll go back. So it's small chunks but big actions.
It's good discipline, really good discipline. Any last question? Anybody else got something that they would like to just raise? Yes, Gary, please.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody. So it's a bit of a follow-on actually from that, Paul. So as we've heard, I'm also a lover of the High Performance podcast. There's been some amazing people on it. But likewise, we've seen some amazing people through Andy interviewed as well. So the question I've got for Andy tonight is, who's the one person that if you could interview Andy, who would you choose that you've not interviewed? Who inspires you enough to want you to interview them?
Great question.
I'd love to interview Gary Vaynerchuk. Santi, I'd love your help to line that up. Jim and I, so Jim used to coach a guy called Chris Finch, and Finchy, when Jim moved on to Manchester, Chris Finch stood in and he came to speak to my bank managers because Jim had moved on. Finchy's now become an NBA coach for the first time. I'd love to have that conversation, Jim and I, to co-host a conversation with Chris Finch to almost plot his journey from being a player for the Sheffield Sharks through to an NBA coach. So I'd absolutely love that. I'd love to interview a series of young entrepreneurs from a different generation to me, young 20-year-olds who are making their way in life from different backgrounds. So I've not particularly got a name for that, but that's how people of my generation will learn. I want to stay relevant for another 25 years or so. I need to know the way people in their early 20s think. So I'd love to get a little cadre of young dynamic entrepreneurs in different parts of the world doing different things. I think that would absolutely be phenomenal as well. But I've got a huge list of people that I've written down that I'm keen to interview, and it's a really interesting thing. And I'd also encourage everyone, I'd love you to bring people that are worthy of being interviewed, and for you to interview them, so it's not always myself. So yeah, there's I feel we're just getting going, but there's a whole range of people I'd love to interview. There's a member, again, Jim and I did a video once, and there was a guy on the video called Dave Leesma, who was an astronaut. There's a US member in Denver called Eric Hogan, and Eric and I met Dave Leesma once, who's the astronaut. So we're trying to track Dave down because I think that'd be pretty cool to get an astronaut talking about, what it's like to be in space and everything else. So yeah, I've got a whole range of different people in my mind to have a conversation with.
Fantastic.
Was it Dave that did one of the introductions to our RBS videos, Andy?
It was Dave who was on the Blast Off video, yeah.
Remember that, yeah. Fantastic.
Brilliant. Guys, our hour is just approaching. What I would say is, if like me, you reflect on things over the next 24, 48 hours, and there's anything that you think you'd like to ask or anything you'd like to add, please send me an email, Paul Mattock at btinternet.com. Nice and simple, Paul Mattock at btinternet.com, and I will liaise with Andy, and we will ensure that your question gets answered. All right, how about that? We'll ensure that your question gets answered. The best ones, I will say to Andy, were from me, but any others, I'll just say they were from yourself. So no problem at all. So thanks for that. Brilliant. And guys, look, thank you for your time. I know it's different time zones wherever we all are. Thank you for taking the time to spend it with Andy and myself. I say we will be running another one in the next week or so at a different time zone to accommodate. You again are all very, very welcome. Might just shake up the questions just to keep Andy off his guard. But thank you for your time. I hope you stay safe, and God bless everybody. See you all very soon, hopefully. All the very best to you.